So, hello there, welcome back to another Night of the Movies video. I'm, of course, Spike the Jedi Knight, and in these videos, I love talking about things, movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's video, I am giving my ranking on all 12 live-action Star Wars movies. So, let's get into it, shall we? My ranking on all 12 live-action Star Wars movies. With the recent release of The Mandalorian and Grogu, I thought it was about time that I ranked all 12 live-action Star Wars movies on this channel, because I am a big Star Wars fan, in case you aren't aware already, although I do speak about it at length on this channel. And I was thinking that I hadn't actually ranked any of the Star Wars movies before on this channel, but then I remembered after The Rise of Skywalker came out in Christmas of 2019, I did do a ranking of all the Star Wars movies by that point. But I don't remember what my ranking was at all then. I honestly have no recollection of what my ranking was in late 2019 after I saw The Rise of Skywalker. So now, this is my proper ranking of all 12 live-action Star Wars movies. Forget the one I did in 2019. This is my true ranking. Until next year when the next live-action Star Wars movie comes out. But anyway, yes, in today's video I thought it would be about time with the release of The Mandalorian and Grogu, with the recent release of The Mandalorian and Grogu, that I ranked all 12 live-action Star Wars movies. Now, just before I get into my ranking, I want to say this. I will not be including the Clone Wars movie in my ranking today. First of all, because it's not a live-action film, it's an animated movie. And second of all, I barely remember anything about it, and I don't want to go back and re-watch it. I remember watching it in 2008 when it came out in the cinema, but I don't think I've re-watched it. I mean, I must have re-watched it. I've re-watched every single Star Wars movie at some point, but again, I have no recollection of rewatching the Clone Wars. So yeah, I'm not including it in this ranking. I'm not including the Clone Wars movie in this ranking today, and I will not be including any of the TV shows in this ranking either. I will not be ranking any of the Star Wars TV shows in this video today, and that includes the live-action Star Wars TV shows, which I have been re-reviewing over the past 5 to 6 months on this channel, but I view them differently than the movies, and to rank them alongside the movies, I don't know, just, it wouldn't feel right in my opinion. So yes, I will not be ranking any of the Star Wars TV shows in this video today. And one thing I want people to remember as well, before I get into my ranking of all 12 live-action Star Wars movies, is that it is only my ranking. The chances are that your ranking is going to be very different, and that's okay. In fact, it's great. If everybody's ranking was exactly the same, then what would be the point of me doing this video? What would be the point of me doing this video today? What would be the point of us talking about movies on YouTube or online in general? What would be the point of all of this if everybody's ranking was the same? So there's a very good chance in this video today that your favourite Star Wars movie will be further down in my list, and vice versa. If you were doing a ranking, my favourite Star Wars movie could be quite low in your list. So just bear that in mind, and bear in mind as well that it's all just a bit of fun. I mean, I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and I'll be honest, I've taken this ranking quite seriously, but at the end of the day, it's all a bit of fun, and if you disagree with me, that's great. That's the point of me doing this ranking video today. But let's disagree with each other fairly, and don't come at me in the comment section below. Don't be nasty if you disagree with some of my rankings. Don't be nasty. At the end of the day, these are just movies, and it's a fun idea, it's a fun video to make. It's a fun thing to do, to rank all 12 live-action Star Wars movies, which is another reason I'm doing it in today's video. So, without further ado, let's get into it, shall we? Let's get into my ranking of all 12 live-action Star Wars movies, and just in case you don't know, the movies I'll be ranking in today's video, it's all 9 main Star Wars movies. So that includes The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker, alongside Rogue One, a Star Wars story, Solo, a Star Wars story, and The Mandalorian and Grogu. That's right, I'll also be ranking the spin-off movies in this video as well. So, let's get into it, shall we? Let's get into my ranking of all 12 live-action Star Wars movies. So let's start off at number 12. What is my least favourite live-action Star Wars film? And, well, number 12 is Solo, a Star Wars story. I don't hate Solo. I don't think it's a terrible film. I think it's actually got some good parts to it. I think the train heist in that film is really enjoyable to watch. Owen Enright plays a good young Han Solo, and Donald Glover plays a young, good Lando Calrissian. There are scenes in that film which I actually think work quite well. But the reason it's at the bottom of my list is that, for me, it just does not feel like a Star Wars film. Whenever I rewatch it, it feels less and less like a Star Wars movie. It just feels like a space adventure that happens to include some Star Wars characters, some Star Wars iconography, and some Star Wars setting that we've seen before. But again, nothing about it really screams Star Wars to me. I watch Solo, I rewatch Solo very occasionally. I'm like, this just all feels very inconsequential as well, and that's another reason it's so far down on my list. Nothing in the film really impacts or changes your perspective on the Star Wars franchise. I understand that might be the point, but I thought after this movie I would think of Han Solo differently, but I don't. I watch Solo, and then I watch the original trilogy, and I'm like, yeah, doesn't really feel like the same character, and it's not really changing my perspective on that character. Again, I think Owen Enright does a good job playing a young Han Solo, but this is one of those cases where the film didn't need to exist. You know, that's a phrase which is thrown around quite a lot regarding certain blockbuster movies, and it's regarding certain blockbuster movies, and it's a phrase that annoys me quite a bit. Okay, that movie didn't need to exist, and guess what? Every movie didn't need to exist, but there are certain movies you watch where it did really feel like it didn't need to exist. It's not important in the grand scheme of things. If this film didn't exist, would I be missing it? And I quite simply think I would not be. Solo is an inconsequential, lackluster film that is not nearly as epic as it should be, that does not feel like a Star Wars movie, and is ultimately why it's my least favourite Star Wars film. That being said, it's over in 2 hours, so there's a big plus, you know? It's not a particularly long movie, and it does move along at a brisk pace. I just wish it felt more like Star Wars, and less like another space adventure that just happens to feature Star Wars iconography and Star Wars characters. So yes, Solo, a Star Wars story, is number 12 on my ranking of all 12 live-action Star Wars movies. And number 11 on this list is Star Wars Episode 2, The Attack of the Clones. Now, I know this film has its fans, and I kind of get why, but I am personally not one of those people who enjoys this movie, and I do think at times it verges on being unwatchable, and I do also think it's a terrible film. So you might be going, but Spike, you've ranked it higher than Solo, a Star Wars story, which you just said you didn't think was a terrible movie, and now you're saying Attack of the Clones is a terrible film? That doesn't really make sense. Why are you ranking it above Solo then? Well, the simple reason is, I think Attack of the Clones feels more like a Star Wars movie than Solo does. Attack of the Clones has a lot of huge issues in my opinion. It's a slog to sit through at times. The Anakin and Padme romance is not believable in the slightest. And the things that happen in this movie, I'm like, what are we doing here? This is a big CGI mishmash with about 100 different things going on in the finale. Although when I was a kid, I absolutely loved the whole Jedi battle stuff. When I watch it now, it's like, this is so unengaging and horribly edited. But it still feels like a Star Wars movie to me, and I do have this nostalgia for it. And I also think it genuinely has some merit. Christopher Lee, the late great Christopher Lee at that, as Count Dooku, is a great addition to the Star Wars franchise. Now, I wish he was in this film a lot more, but he's in this film nonetheless, so, you know, give credit where credit's due. The John Williams musical score, whilst it's my least favourite of all the John Williams Star Wars musical scores, is still really good, and has some great new pieces of music in there. For instance, Anakin and Padme's theme, their romance theme in the musical score, is a great piece of music. So there is things to like, and there's some good action set pieces. The chase through Coruscant early on in the film is well done. There's some, if you look behind the scenes, they were developing technology. They were pushing the boundaries of filmmaking in terms of visual effects when it came to this movie, and you have to admire that. But when I watch this film, I struggle to enjoy it nowadays. It feels like Star Wars to me, but also it doesn't have enough Star Wars in there. It doesn't have enough space battles. There's like one space battle that I remember in the movie, and I've seen the film quite a few times, and there's so much of this film which is like, oh, that's a great idea. You could have done something really interesting with that. Jango Fett is an interesting antagonist, but they don't do anything with him, and he's defeated really easily. And the finale of the film, again, on paper, as a kid, I loved the finale of the film. I was like, oh, there's a Jedi battle, it's so exciting. And then rewatching it again about a year ago, I was like, actually, it's not that good, is it? The finale of the film is a bit of a huge mess, So yeah, I am personally someone who was not a fan of Star Wars Episode 2, The Attack of the Clones, which is why it is number 11 on my ranking of all 12 live-action Star Wars movies. And number 10 on this list is Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Now, this will probably be number 12 on most people's rankings, and I completely understand why. If I was to have a conversation with somebody who hated this film, and they gave me all the reasons they hated this movie, they went through every single reason that this movie was absolutely terrible, I'd probably nod along and agree with them. But I don't mind it. I'm not saying I love the film, I'm not saying I even like the film that much, but I do think it is unfairly, heavily criticised. There are good parts to the movie that I think people just forget. For instance, the John Williams musical score is soaring in this film. I love how it brings back some of the classic themes from the previous Star Wars movies. And he actually has a cameo in this film himself. John Williams hadn't been in a Star Wars movie. He'd done all the music to all 9 main Star Wars movies up to this point, but he hadn't actually featured in any sort of role in any previous Star Wars movie before this. And he has a cameo in this film. And I like that John Williams is now a part of the Star Wars franchise because he appears in this movie. I also think that Daisy Ridley's performance as Rey is her best performance in the Star Wars sequel trilogy as a whole. And there was some great visual effects in there, some great practical effects. And the cinematography in this film is beautiful. This is a beautifully shot movie. And you can tell it is directed by somebody who loves Star Wars, who loves movies. And J.J. Abrams has made no secret about this. He is somebody who loves cinema. If you watch any of these non-Star Wars movies, you can see that as well, whether it's Super 8 or his Star Trek films, or even what's the other movie he directed? Mission Impossible 3. You can see how much he loves movies when you watch his previous films, and Rise of Skywalker is no exception. But the film is one big mess that does not really work. And it's like this Frankenstein monster of a film. They were stitching it all together last minute. That's what it feels like when you watch it. There's a whole scavenger hunt in the film. You're going, what are we doing here? Palpatine's back, and yet we're doing this sort of scavenger hunt to find him. But can't you just... Why? Why do we have to have all this? Doesn't need to happen in the film. Palpatine is not particularly well used. Now, I'm somebody who doesn't mind the Palpatine scenes in the film. I actually quite like them, but I'll also admit they should be a lot better than they are. And so much of the film, you're sat there thinking, really? This is it? This is what he came up with for the final Star Wars movie? The so-called final Star Wars film. I do think we'll get a Star Wars Episode 10 within the next 5 to 10 years, but this is what you came up with for the so-called final Star Wars movie? It's just not that good, yeah. Rise of Skywalker, although I don't mind it, it moves at a brisk pace and I like that about it. It never stops going. It just all plays it too safe, though. The stakes aren't high, and they should be for the 9th and so-called final Star Wars movie. The characters don't really have any character arcs to them, and although I do think there is some merit when it comes to the film, and I don't think it is given nearly enough credit as it should be given, I can also completely understand why people absolutely hate this film. Still, I don't mind it. I would rewatch it happily. But it has a lot of big problems in there, and it should be so much better than and than it actually is. So that is why Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, is number 10 on my ranking of all 12 main live-action Star Wars movies. And number 9, I'm going to try and speed up this list a bit because I'm taking quite a bit of time. And number 9 on my ranking of all 12 live-action Star Wars movies is The Mandalorian and Grogu, our most recent live-action Star Wars film. Now, I put this at this point on the list because I enjoyed this movie. I actually thought it was okay. I did not think it was a bad film, but it should have been so much better than it ended up being. It has many, many missed opportunities. And that's something which really bugs me about big blockbusters nowadays. Missed opportunities. And you could have done something special with the Mandalorian and Grogu story, with our titular character's story, when it came to this film. And in my opinion, they didn't. So there's nothing about the film which is particularly cinematically engaging or emotionally engaging. Again, there are good parts to the film. It's got some really good action set pieces. It feels like a Star Wars movie to me, like The Rise of Skywalker did as well, which is why I ranked it above Attack of the Clones. You know, when a Star Wars movie feels like Star Wars to me, I instantly find it more rewatchable, if you follow me. But The Mandalorian and Grogu, going back onto this film, yes, it feels like Star Wars. Yes, it's got some good action sequences, and there's a really good scene. There's a really good sequence in the film revolving around Grogu looking after the Mandalorian. But the film, whilst I sat there watching it in the cinema, I couldn't escape the feeling that it should be better. Why isn't this better than it is? You know, why is this a story we decided to tell for Star Wars' first big screen outing in 7 years? Why is this the Star Wars story we decided to tell for the Mandalorian's transition into cinema from TV? Why are we telling this story? What makes the story particularly special? And the answer is nothing really. It's inconsequential. And I wasn't going into this film expecting there to be something groundbreaking and, you know, world-altering in the Star Wars franchise, but I wasn't going into this film expecting these emotional stakes to feel higher, and they just weren't. Again, the film is okay. It's not unwatchable. It's got some good parts to it, but it should have been so much better, and it's a little, from what I remember, and I don't remember loads about it, which isn't great because I saw it only 5 days ago now, but from what I remember, it was also a little too CGI dependent as well. So that is why The Mandalorian and Grogu is number 9 on my ranking of all 12 live-action Star Wars movies. And number 8 on my ranking of all 12 live-action Star Wars movies is Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Now, if you're somebody who watched my review of The Mandalorian and Grogu, and if you haven't yet, please do go and check it out, because it took a while to edit. But if you're somebody who has seen that review, you will know that in that review, I compared The Mandalorian and Grogu to this film, to Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. And I said, I kind of view them equally. At least I think I said that in my review. To me, they're both unremarkable films that have good parts to them, but should be so much better. Yeah, I kind of view them in the same way, and I think they're on the same level of quality. So you may be going, why then? Why have you ranked The Phantom Menace above The Mandalorian and Grogu? And the simple answer is nostalgia. The Phantom Menace was the first Star Wars movie I remember watching from a young age. You know, I don't think I watched any Star Wars movie before The Phantom Menace. I still remember The Phantom Menace on VHS and watching it and then being kind of amazed by what I was experiencing. I haven't seen anything like it before, and that was the film that got me into Star Wars. The Phantom Menace was the movie that opened my world up to Star Wars, up to this franchise, and so for that reason I will always be forever grateful to this movie. I always have this nostalgia for it. Now, when I rewatch it, I realise the film's got a lot of big problems. It doesn't really work. It's a slog at times to sit through. But I also still think it has some legitimately good sequences. For instance, the pod race sequence in this film, brilliant. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And the duel between Darth Maul, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon at the end of the film, I think is one of the best duels in the Star Wars franchise, period. But two sequences don't make a film great, you know? And I think there's a lot in this film which, again, going back on to what I was saying before, there's a lot in this film which, there's a lot of missed opportunities in this movie, and it should be a lot better than it ends up being. For the first movie in the Star Wars timeline, this film should be so exciting. And when I rewatch it now, it isn't. But when I was a kid, I loved this film, and I'd always have that nostalgia for it. So that's why I ranked it higher than The Mandalorian and Grogu, and that's why I still enjoy this film, because of nostalgia. And also, I do think it has some good sequences, and, you know, I love seeing Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon Jinn, and there were good parts of the film, and it was trying to, you know, I always love films when they try and push the boundaries of filmmaking, push the boundaries of where filmmaking was at the time, do something different that we've seen in films before, and The Phantom Menace did that. It was pushing the boundaries in terms of visual effects in cinema, but that doesn't make the film better, and it is a bit of a slog to sit through nowadays. Still, I will have this nostalgia for it, which is why I put it number 8 on my ranking of all 12 live-action Star Wars movies. And number 7 on this list is Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Now, over the past 5 years, I have spoken, actually over 5 years now, more like over the past 7 years even, I've spoken to quite a few people who actually say that Revenge of the Sith is their favourite Star Wars movie. And I kind of get it. It's not mine though. I appreciate this film more as time goes on. There's a lot I like about it. But I'd be lying if I said I loved the film. The first half I do think drags a little. The opening 10 to 20 minutes of the film I think is great. But then it slows down a little and I do think it drags. However, once I can turn to the dark side, I'm like, okay, now we're cooking with gas, you know what I mean? And the rest of the film I think has a dark beating heart throughout it. And it has some of the best filmmaking George Lucas has brought to the Star Wars franchise, because he wrote and directed Revenge of the Sith. I think the second half of Revenge of the Sith is actually great, but I don't think the first half is, which is why I don't think it's a great movie overall. I think Revenge of the Sith has a villain problem as well. Count Dooku is at the start of the film. He's like a leftover thought from Attack of the Clones, and I understand Count Dooku plays a big part in Clone Wars, but I haven't seen a Clone Wars TV show. I have no plans to watch it, and I don't think you should need to watch a TV show in order to understand something in a movie. You know what I mean? That's always annoyed me, and I've spoken about that at length in my previous Star Wars reviews, particularly in my reviews of the Star Wars prequel trilogy. So when I watch Revenge of the Sith, as somebody who hasn't seen the Clone Wars TV show, I'm like, okay, Count Dooku, although I love Christopher Lee, I feel he's wasted as a villain in the prequel trilogy overall. General Grievous, cool looking villain, great idea for a villain. Somebody who, you know, this sort of creature droid who has got 4 lightsabers. Great idea for a villain, but again, wasted and bit of an odd character. Like, he speaks a lot like this. Anyway, yeah, I'm not huge on General Grievous. I wish I was, but I'm not, because I also think it's a wasted villain. So I do think that Revenge of the Sith has a villain problem. There are parts to it I'm like, okay, let's speed it up, alright? Let's just get to the meat of everything. And there's some dialogue in the movie which is not great. But, like I said already, the film is saved for me in the second half when everything goes dark. Everything gets much darker. Anakin turns to the dark side. There's some great duels going on in the later half of the film, and I do think that the lightsaber duel between Anakin and Obi-Wan in Revenge of the Sith is, well, yeah, it's probably the best duel in the Star Wars franchise, in my opinion. Actually, I might change that. I think one in Return of the Jedi is better, but the one in this movie is also a close follow-up. I think also that this film has the best Hayden Christensen performance as Anakin Skywalker in any of the Star Wars movies, and in any of his Star Wars appearances at that. I actually think Revenge of the Sith is a good film. I like it quite a bit. I just wish I loved it, you know? I don't love it quite as much as some people do, but I do think it's saved by its second half, and there's some really great parts to it, particularly the opening as well. Yeah, I think Revenge of the Sith has aged very well. I don't love it the same way some other people do. But still, it's number 7 on my ranking of all 12 live-action Star Wars movies. And number 6 on this list, for me, is Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. Originally just titled Star Wars, this movie released in 1977 and was the beginning of a phenomenon. It was the beginning of a franchise which would be so important to so many people, including me, which is one of the reasons I do appreciate A New Hope quite a lot. But I don't love it. I've spoken about this on this channel in the past. There's a lot that I love about A New Hope, a lot that I love about the context around this film. Like, if you read into it, There was so much turmoil going on behind the scenes of this film. They only had like 2 of the visual effects shots finished 6 months before the film released. There's all this stuff about how George Lucas was constantly depressed whilst making this movie, which I find very interesting. I also find it fascinating where cinema was at, where movies being released in Hollywood were at before this film came out. Like, you had so many depressing Hollywood movies out in the early 70s and in the mid 70s before this film came out, and then this movie came out and it changed what people thought cinema could be, what cinema was like in the late 70s. I love all the stuff that you can read into surrounding this film. I think the context of this movie is more interesting than the film itself. I think the film itself is a little too, for lack of a better phrase, simple. On a rewatch, I also think you can tell that this was the very first Star Wars movie. You know, it doesn't quite have the same epic feel of the Star Wars movies that came after. It doesn't quite have the same world building that the Star Wars movies had that came after. I think it feels very small in comparison to other Star Wars movies, and I also think it's one of those Star Wars movies that if it came out now, people would be tearing it to shreds. You know, there are huge plot holes in this film that people just ignore, and I don't think the finale is quite as exciting and epic as it should be. I think A New Hope is a good movie. I'm sat here and I feel like I sound like I dislike the film when I don't, you know, but I just don't love it, you know, and I think there's a lot that I like about it, there's a lot that I appreciate about it, including the amazing John Williams musical score, you know, which really saved the film. I don't think if John Williams scored this movie, it would be nearly as fun to watch, but it doesn't leave me with the same effect that the other 2 movies in the original trilogy do. And I do think that it's a movie that's very much a product of its time, and if it was made now, if this film came out now, people would be tearing it to shreds. Like, people going, oh my god, that's the duel we get between Vader and Obi-Wan after the events of Revenge of the Sith. That's so disappointing. And yet, because the film came out at a time where it was this big thing for so many people, they just get past, they just ignore, they just wear rose-tinted glasses when it comes to this film and ignore all the criticisms, when I'm not somebody who does. I will sit there and go, okay, New Hope has a lot of problems with it. I still find it very enjoyable to watch. I still like a lot about it, but I'm also not going to sit here and say it's a masterpiece, because I don't personally think it is, which is why it is number 6 on my ranking of all 12 live-action Star Wars movies. And number 5 on this list, this is where it starts getting a bit controversial, my list, but number 5 is Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. You heard me correctly, my 5th favourite live-action Star Wars movie is The Force Awakens. There, I said it. I love The Force Awakens. It was the first Star Wars movie I saw in the cinema. I remember watching it and going, oh my god, this is so immensely entertaining. You know, I sat there and I had the biggest grin on my face throughout all of the movie when I watched it in the cinema in Christmas of 2015. Now, when I watch The Force Awakens, I will admit it has problems. I think they could have come up with something better than Starkiller Base, which is just the Death Star, you know, 3.0, but it's a very enjoyable film. It's clearly made by somebody who loves Star Wars. I think the way they use Han Solo is brilliant. The John Williams musical score, it feels like he never left scoring those movies, even though there's a 10-year gap between him scoring this film and him scoring Revenge of the Sith. It has so many great action set pieces. So much of the film just feels, it's just filled with joy. You know what I mean? So much of The Force Awakens is filled with joy, and it moves at this great pace, and it never lets go of your engagement. Does it all work? I'm not going to say yes, but what it is a proper Star Wars movie that I remember watching in the cinema and absolutely loving and going, okay, I feel like I'm about to become an even bigger Star Wars fan than I already am. And I still watch The Force Awakens with a huge grin on my face. Again, I'm not saying it's perfect, I'm not saying it's a masterpiece, but you know what? I love it. I absolutely love it, which is why it's number 5 on this list. And number 4 on my ranking of all 12 live-action Star Wars movies is Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. You heard me correctly. The Last Jedi is my 4th favourite Star Wars film. Boy, is that going to annoy a lot of people, probably. I don't know. I don't know how many people care about my ranking. But, yes, The Last Jedi, I love to pieces. I'm not saying it's a perfect film, but I think it is one of the best Disney Star Wars movies. I love it. There's so much about this film that I think works brilliantly. And again, I'm not saying it's a perfect film. I think Finn's storyline could have been better in this movie. But I love what they do with Luke Skywalker. Don't care what anybody says. I love the whole finale of the film. I love the twist, how Luke tricks Kylo Ren. Love that. Love the opening of the film. I love all this stuff going on with Poe Dameron in the film. I love all this stuff with Snoke and how they kill Snoke off. I love how this film was so not what we expected. People went into this film expecting one kind of a movie, and Rian Johnson, who co-wrote and directed the film, gave us something very, 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 very different. And I loved what he did. I think it's one of the best shot Star Wars movies. I think the musical score by John Williams is his best work in the sequel trilogy. And the film itself, every time I watch it, I go, oh, that feels like Star Wars to me. That feels like proper Star Wars. Not that The Force Awakens didn't, because again, that was number 5 on my list of my ranking of all 12 live-action Star Wars movies, but The Last Jedi feels like Star Wars to me in all the ways I wanted to at the same time, you know? The Last Jedi, yeah, I love it, and I don't care what anybody says. I think it's a great movie that just gets better the more I watch it, which is why it's number 4 on this list. And number 3 on my ranking of all 12 live-action Star Wars movies is Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. Our first live-action Star Wars spin-off movie delivered in pretty much every way you wanted it to. It's got a perfect mix of familiarity and originality, doing something different, but also doing something very familiar, something which I think the best of Disney Star Wars does. And this movie does it too. The highest quality, the way it balances the stuff we see in the Star Wars galaxy before, but also adding in new elements, is done to such a it's done in such a well-balanced way. I think the use of Darth Vader in the film is perfect. He's not in the film that much, but when he is in the movie, you feel his presence. And I also think the finale of the film, with the big space battle, you know, going on above Scarif, and then the battle on Scarif itself, is immensely entertaining to watch. I think the new characters are all interesting in their own ways. And again, the returning character, Grand Moff Tarkin, I think is used very well. And also there's a great new villain in this film, in Krennic. I think Krennic is a brilliant villain. I also think this film is even better now after Andor seasons 1 and 2 have been and gone, because if you watch Andor seasons 1 and 2 and then watch Rogue One is so much more impactful. Am I saying Rogue One fires on all cylinders? No, I do think the Michael Giacchino, is that how you pronounce his name? Giacchino, I think that's how you pronounce his name. The Michael Giacchino score could have been better, but he only had 4 weeks to compose the score, and I do think he did a very good job. The musical score during the sequence when Cassian, and spoiler here in case you haven't seen the film, but if you haven't seen the film, why are you watching this video today? But the music that's used just before Jyn and Cassian die, and everything is blowing up, and you know what scene I'm talking about, where Cassian says to Jyn, "Your father would be proud." That piece of music that's used there is one of, I think, Michael Giacchino's best pieces of music. I think the score itself could have been better, but I think he did the best job he could have. And that's kind of my biggest criticism with the film, because again, there's so much about the film where there's a lot of new elements in there, but they're also balanced with elements we've already seen before, and the film feels like a proper Star Wars movie, whilst also feeling a bit like a war movie. And I'll always remember this. You know, my dad, who's passed away now, he came out the cinema in 2016 after watching this film, and he said, "That's my new favourite Star Wars movie." And so I'll always have a fondness for it because of that as well. Because he was never a big Star Wars fan. He'd seen the movies, I don't think he minded them, but they were never particularly memorable to him. However, Rogue One was. He would talk to me about Rogue One. He would talk to me about how much he enjoyed it. And so that's another reason I enjoy it as well so much. I love Rogue One. I love it. And I still watch it now with a huge grin and think, that is a brilliant way that it concluded the story that began with Andor Season 1, and also brilliantly sets up A New Hope as well. Love Rogue One, which is why it's my third favourite live-action Star Wars movie. And number 2 on this list of my 12, on my ranking of all 12 live-action Star Wars movies, is Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi is the ultimate comfort movie for me. Every single time I stick it on, I have the, you know what I'm about to say now, biggest grin on my face. I genuinely do. Right from the opening, all the stuff with Jabba's palace, to all the stuff with Endor, to the final big battle, I can't get enough of this movie. And I don't care what anybody says. I love the Ewoks, hence why I have a huge Ewok Funko Pop back there, and I've got loads of other Ewok Funko Pops back there as well. I love the Ewoks. I'm somebody who watches the movie at the right time in their childhood to really appreciate the Ewoks. If I watch this film now, I'd be going, really? Muppets? These essentially Muppets defeat the Empire? Ain't that a bit silly? But I watched it at a time when the Ewoks were everything to me, and they still kind of are. I love the Ewoks to pieces. Hence why I met Warwick Davis at Star Wars Celebration in 2023. Yeah, I love Return of the Jedi. Everything about it I just think is wonderful and full of joy, and it also has the best lightsaber duel in all of Star Wars, in the duel between Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader and the Emperor, which is emotionally so well executed. And the space battle in this movie is the best space battle. The destruction, the blowing up of the second Death Star is the best space battle in all of Star Wars. There's so many classic one-liners in this movie. It's a trap! And the opening of all this stuff with Jabba the Hutt. I mean, I can't get enough of this one. With the Rancor as well. There's just so many elements of this movie where I watch and I think about it, I'm like, Return of the Jedi is great, isn't it? You know, and it's a very satisfying conclusion to the next movie that I'm going to mention in my ranking, which I'll go into very shortly. But I love how it concludes everything from its predecessor as well. Yeah, this is, I think, the most satisfying conclusion in the Star Wars franchise. I think it's so much more satisfying than The Rise of Skywalker. And also, one last thing, I love how the ending isn't overdone. It's just people dancing and having fun and fireworks, you know? I know in the remastered version they did overdo it a bit, but in the original version they're just celebrating on Endor, and I love that. You know, I love how they didn't overdo it in the original version of the movie. That being said, I also love the remastered cut as well. I don't care what anybody says. I think there's a lot to love in the remastered version as well. I think Return of the Jedi is great. It's the ultimate comfort movie for me. And whenever I call a film a comfort movie, I think that's one of the best compliments you can give a film. And Return of the Jedi, as what I said, is the ultimate comfort movie to me. I love it. Filled with so much joy. And it has Ewoks in there as well. How can you not love Return of the Jedi? It's great. And that's why it's my second favourite Star Wars movie. And my favourite Star Wars movie, number 1 in my ranking of all 12 live-action Star Wars movies, is Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. What is there to say about this film other than it's perfect? Literally from the get-go, it's perfect. There's not a single thing I would change about this movie. Not a single thing. This film is incredibly well made. It develops the story in the Star Wars timeline from A New Hope in a far more emotionally engaging way than A New Hope ever did. It has twists in there which have been quoted to death, which are ingrained in pop culture, yet the twists still work. The twists in this movie are still effective. Darth Vader telling Luke Skywalker that he is his father, although we all know it, we all know that it's coming, it's still effective. When you watch it now, when I watch it for like the billionth time, I still go, even so I know it's coming, you know, and that tells you how well of a film it is, how well of a written film it is, you know. Plus, the opening, all the stuff on Hoth, I think is remarkable. The 80s and how they did that, if you look at the behind the scenes, it doesn't look like stop motion. And I mean, all these years later, Empire Strikes Back came out in 1980. We're in 2026 now, and all these years later, I still can't get over how they did the 80s in that movie. And all the stuff with Cloud City, I think is so engaging. But then all the stuff in the middle is great as well, with the Millennium Falcon being chased, and the introduction to Boba Fett, and Luke being trained by Yoda. I mean, the puppetry there, and the fact that they got the guy who played Miss Piggy and the Muppets to play Yoda. I mean, I just love so much about this movie. And also, I think it has John Williams' best Star Wars musical score. I think John Williams' work in all the original Star Wars movies is great. I didn't say that when I was talking about Return of the Jedi, but I think his score to Return of the Jedi is fantastic as well. But his score to Empire Strikes Back, I think, is his best Star Wars music, without a doubt. It's also the first time we hear the Imperial March, you know, Darth Vader's theme. Bom, 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 ba-dom, bom, ba-dom. It's the first time we hear it used. And that theme as well has been ingrained into pop culture, and there's a reason for that. It's become iconic, and there's a reason for that. It's because it's brilliant. Again, there was not a single thing I would change about Empire Strikes Back. On a different day, it may even be my favourite movie, but right now I'd still say my favourite film of all time is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. But ask me about a week's time, I might change my mind, and I might say Empire Strikes Back is my favourite movie of all time. I might rewatch it and go, actually, no, yeah, I think that's better than Last Crusade. So yeah, I think Empire Strikes Back is perfect. I think everything about it is perfect. And I also love the ending. It was the first time I was like, oh my god, the good guys didn't win. The bad guys win. And I remember going, oh my god, I didn't think that could happen in a movie. I was just so taken aback by that. So yeah, Empire Strikes Back in many ways changed my world. I mean, The Phantom Menace is when I saw it for the first time, but then Empire Strikes Back did even more so. And I still watch the film now, and I'm taken by it. Even so I know everything that's coming in the movie. Even so I know this film back to front. And I've seen it back to the front as well, you know. Even so I know this movie inside out. It still works for me on all levels. Yeah, I love Empire Strikes Back. Love it to pieces. And in my opinion, it is the perfect Star Wars movie. And that is my ranking of all 12 live action Star Wars movies. So let's see if I can do it off the top of my head right now, as I'm sweating buckets because I'm recording this on like the hottest day of the year. But let's see if I can remember my ranking of all 12 live action Star Wars movies off the top of my head right now. At number 12 is Solo: A Star Wars Story. And number 11 is Star Wars Episode 2, The Attack of the Clones. And number 10 is Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. And number 9 is The Mandalorian and Grogu. I wish that was high, by the way. I wish it was so much. I wish I loved that movie. Anyway, and number 8 on this list is Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Now the list gets a bit hazy to me, but let's see if I can remember it. And number 7 on this list has to be Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. I think I've got that right. And number 6 on this list, I've got it there, but I'm not looking at it, by the way. And number 6 on this list is Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. And number 5 on my list was Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. And number 4 on this list was Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. And number 3 on this list was Rogue One: A Star Wars Story. Number 2 on this list was Star Wars Episode 6, The Return of the Jedi. And the number 1 on this list, my favourite Star Wars movie, was Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. Did I get that correct? I think I did, yeah. 12 Solo, 11 Attack of the Clones, 10 Rise of Skywalker, 9 Mandalorian and Grogu, 8 The Phantom Menace, 7 Revenge of the Sith, 6 A New Hope, 5 The Force Awakens, 4 The Last Jedi, 3 Rogue One, 2 Return of the Jedi, and number 1, The Empire Strikes Back. Yes, that is my ranking of all 12 live action Star Wars movies. And just to reiterate, that's my ranking. Your ranking is probably very different, and that's totally okay. Please don't come at me and say, oh, your opinion's wrong and everything about you is wrong, and then start insulting my appearance. Please don't come at me if you have a different opinion. But if you do have a different opinion, let me know what your opinion is. And if you disagree with me, that's great. That's why we do these videos on this channel. That's why people make videos like this. And again, this is just my ranking. Your ranking is very different. Although one last thing I will say is I think all these movies I think that's I think it's credit to Star Wars that all these movies are at least watchable. People say Rise of Skywalker is unwatchable. No, it's not. There are certain movies which are unwatchable, as a point of making, and Rise of Skywalker, at least for my money, is not one of them. And I think it's credit to Star Wars that it's been through all these filmmakers. It's been through the ringer so many times. Is that the word? But you know what I mean. It's been through so much, and yet these movies are still resonating with fans. I don't care what anybody says. You know, you can criticise a movie to death, and people have with the Star Wars sequel trilogy, and there's been lots said about our most recent Star Wars movie, The Mandalorian and Grogu, but the reality is, these movies are still resonating with fans. People are still going to watch these movies at the cinema. People are still coming out of them going, that was enjoyable to watch. I don't care what anybody says. I remember when Last Jedi came out. A lot of people who now claim to hate the movie loved it. I remember when Rise of Skywalker came out. People who now claim to really dislike the film loved it. I do think some people just become sheep sometimes when it comes to Star Wars movies. And that does grind my gears. And there are a lot of people right now, I'm looking on social media, who are really enjoying The Mandalorian and Grogu. I wish I was one of them. I didn't mind the film, but I wish I loved it. I wish I liked it a whole lot more than I did. However, the point I'm making is, this franchise is still resonating with people. It resonated with people when the prequels came out, about 20 years ago now, and it resonates with people when the original films came out about 50 years ago now. This franchise will continue resonating with people, and there'll be a whole lot of people in about 10 years time who defend the sequel trilogy. You know, it's how this franchise works, and people say that the Star Wars franchise is dead. I don't agree with you, and there's a whole tangent itself, and it's a whole different kettle of fish, but I wanted to bring it up because I did this ranking video today, and I was ranking all the movies thinking, well, each one has good parts to it. I even said that, you know, each Star Wars movie has good parts to it, and I do think that is the case, and I think that's another reason why the Star Wars franchise isn't dead, because people are still debating these movies and will continue to debate them until the dawn of time. I just think that's what's going to happen. Still, now people debate The Last Jedi, and that's keeping Star Wars alive. You might not like it, but the more you talk about these movies, the more you're keeping them alive. Even if you're talking about them in a negative way, you're still keeping this franchise alive. All these people who say the Star Wars franchise is dead, no, it's not, because you're still going on about it. And like I'm doing today, I was going through my ranking and thinking, you know what, each movie at least has good parts to it. And each movie, I would say, it's at least watchable as well, which is not bad for a franchise to be going on for almost 50 years. Yeah, it's 49 years old this year. Next year will be the 50th anniversary of the release of A New Hope, which is insane to say. But I don't think the Star Wars franchise is dead, and doing this ranking video today has made me realise that. Yeah. And this will probably be the last Star Wars video I make for quite a bit of time. I will do more Star Wars videos in the lead up to the release of Star Wars Starfighter coming out next year, but right now I want to talk about other things. I've talked a lot about Star Wars on this channel over the past couple of years, and I want to move on talking about other things now. You know, I will probably talk about Star Wars here and there over the next year, particularly if something new Star Wars comes out, but I think this is going to be it for me for Star Wars for a while. Yeah, I think I'm going to stop doing Star Wars videos for a bit. I'll say that I'll make another Star Wars video next week, won't I? But no, I do think I will stop making Star Wars videos for a bit now, and move on to talking about some other movie topics. If you've got some ideas, let me know in the comment section below, and also let me know what your ranking of all 12 live-action Star Wars movies is in the comment section below as well. And do you think that Star Wars is a dead franchise? If you do, that's fair, it's your opinion, but I just think you're wrong. However, whatever your opinion is on the Star Wars franchise as a whole, please let me know in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching this video today, and if you haven't yet, please click down below and like and subscribe on this video, if you enjoyed the video, of course, and look forward to many more videos like this coming very, very soon on this channel. As I already said, thank you for watching this video today, and I will see you guys again soon, but bye for now, bye.